Greetings. We're really excited you've joined us today for the webinar Redesigning School in the Era of Declining Enrollment, District Strategies. When Bellwether released their toolkit this spring, we reached out to them because a number of the key strategies they offered for strategically addressing declining enrollment mapped to the Center for School and Systems Redesign framework for high school transformation. We are glad to co-host this learning session with Bellwether, and we're grateful for our co-sponsors, CTA, ASCA, and CSBA. We also want to acknowledge the Stewart Foundation, a primary funder of the center's work. Today, we're going to have a very brief research presentation on some of the enrollment trends over the past 20 years, allowing us to consider some of the challenges as well as the opportunities that this significant shift presents. Following, I'll offer remarks about why it's critical to redesign high schools in this moment and a framework for deep transformation. We'll move to a panel discussion with leaders from Anaheim Union High School District, and then we'll open up the floor to audience questions. We look forward to a very robust conversation. I'm excited to welcome Paul Beach, Associate Partner at Bellwether in the Policy and Evaluation Practice area. In his role, Paul provides policy research and evaluation to support on a variety of projects for partners that span the education sector and nonprofit organization. Paul is the primary author on Navigating Change, Strategies to Strengthen California High School Amid Declining Enrollment, and he's also the co-author of Navigating Declining Enrollment, a toolkit for California district leaders to design stronger schools and system. As I mentioned, he'll discuss some of the trends that Bellwether has studied in the state and some of the strategies they have identified through this research. Welcome, Paul.
Thank you, Cheryl, and hello, everyone. I also want to extend my thanks to the Stewart Foundation, who supported Bellwether's work on both the report and toolkit that Cheryl mentioned. I'm really thrilled to be part of this panel. I'm looking forward to talking about how districts can leverage this moment of fiscal transition to redesign schools and systems. I'm going to spend just a few minutes describing the state of enrollment declines in California, what it means for budget realignment in districts, and how we think this moment, as challenging as it is, presents real opportunities for districts to redesign schools in ways that align with the science of adolescent learning and development. I want to start by saying we're working to connect two areas of research, policy, and practice that some people might not think fit so neatly together. First, there's research and policy work to understand declining enrollment in California, what's driving that decline, and what it means for school and district funding. Please go check out all the great work and analysis from the Public Policy Institute of California for more on declining enrollment. They do some wonderful work over there. Second, organizations like LPI are leaders in the field when it comes to school and system redesign. Their design principles for schools and the 10 features for success publications have been really instrumental in our work at Bellwether. And at Bellwether, we've been really trying to bridge these two areas of policy and practice. We think there's a really strong case for redesigning schools, which I won't get into, but LPI does a wonderful job describing. But the gap we're trying to fill at Bellwether is how do you think and approach redesigning schools while also realigning budgets to address long-term enrollment declines, especially because most redesign efforts require more resources, not less, to implement typically. For the past several years, my colleagues at Bellwether and I have been conducting research, writing reports, producing toolkits that all aim to support district leaders in proactively responding to declining enrollment in ways that allow them to redesign schools and systems. We really focus on unpacking what declining enrollment means for district budgeting, what opportunities budget realignment presents for strengthening schools, and then offering examples that people can learn from in the field. Links to our more recent report and toolkit, I believe, can be found in the chat. Would you mind going to the next slide, please? Thank you. I'm going to spend just a minute here describing the state of enrollment declines in California. I think as everyone on this panel and most people listening know, public school enrollment has been declining in California for several years, and the state experienced 8 straight years of decline so far. Nearly 3/4 of California districts have experienced enrollment decline since the pandemic, with large districts and those on the coast experiencing the most severe declines. Declining enrollment is driven primarily by a decline in the school-age population, driven by falling birth rates, but also reduced immigration, increased out-of-state migration, people leaving the state, and increased public school opt-out, students leaving the public school system altogether. In a state as big as California, there's a lot of nuances, of course, but the overall message I want to get across is that enrollment is declining and it's expected to decline for the next 20 years or so in California. The Department of Finance in California projects the state will lose close to another million students during the next 20 years. It's important to note that the majority of states are experiencing declines in K-12 enrollment. So this is a national issue that people and districts are struggling with all over the country in terms of how to address this in ways that improve opportunities for students. Can you go to the next slide, please? Thank you. Now for the challenge. Declining enrollment can create severe budget challenges for school districts. That's because districts are funded based on enrollment and average daily attendance in California, meaning the loss of students leads to a loss in total revenue for districts. Many districts that have experienced enrollment declines in recent years have avoided having to make really tough decisions about declining enrollment due to two well-known budget cushions. Increase in school funding due to a strong state economy, which has been great to see, as well as the influx of federal COVID relief dollars. However, those cushions are moving away in the coming years, and districts are going to have less revenue and will be facing really tough decisions about programs, staff, and school facilities. Ultimately, many districts have and will continue to have to realign their budgets to address structural deficits and avoid situations where they are spreading resources too thinly across schools and students. Now for the opportunity, on the part I like to talk about more, the goal of this webinar and our work at Bellwether is to really describe the fiscal reality of this really challenging situation, while also highlighting strategies that show it's possible to improve and transform learning opportunities for students through realignment. Our stance is simple. I think whether it's intentional or not, whether it's explicit or not, district realignment almost always results in changed programs, in changed schools, in changed services, and changed systems, whether that's through reductions of some type or district reorganization that results in people and resources being deployed differently in the classroom. We think that districts that see this and proactively use this opportunity to redesign schools can really make the most of a really challenging situation. In our research, we've sort of covered countless ways that districts can redesign schools through budget realignment. Just to name a few, districts can adopt flexible course delivery models like hub models where students from many schools come to one central location for courses or programs that can't be offered at every school, or innovative dual enrollment programs which can maximize student choice and create opportunities for the district to share costs with other organizations like post-secondary institutions. Districts can also partner with local organizations to provide students with wraparound supports and services that the district may no longer be able to afford. And then districts can also sell, lease, repurpose underutilized facilities or district property to support learning and address community needs. Please go check out our report and toolkit for more details on these examples. And please share any examples you have in the chat or email me directly about districts that are redesigning schools and systems in response to declining enrollment. We are always on the hunt for more examples. We know there are lots of examples out there, but that they often aren't documented or the story hasn't been told. And we really want to be part of that storytelling process because we think districts across the country can really benefit from hearing how their peers are navigating declining enrollment. Of course, one of our examples comes from Anaheim Union's efforts, which we highlight in our toolkit. And with that, I will turn it back over to you, Cheryl.
Thanks so much, Paul. So, some of the lessons Paul offered can apply broadly to districts throughout the nation. We want to focus on systems level solution, particularly how do we make strategic decisions in an environment of constrained resources that get us to better outcomes for students, particularly as we experience this rapidly changing context for schools and also for industries more broadly. So, why redesign high schools? Not despite the current uncertainty in our world, but because of it, we must kind of act now to transform the current systems. We know that schools were designed in the 1900s to be efficient. They were focused on rote memorization rather than deep learning and developments of students. Teachers were often isolated and they were required to teach discrete content area with little knowledge, perhaps, of what their colleagues were teaching in the next classroom or in another space. The fixed ability mindset who was smart and who was not, led us to tracking, where capable students were offered more demanding curriculum and others were relegated to lower track courses with little or no movement despite growth that they might have demonstrated or a particular expertise or strength in a different content area. While we know a tremendous more now about the science of learning and development, not that much has changed, particularly in large comprehensive high schools over the past 100 years. Most students don't experience caring and supportive environments. They don't feel well known by adults. Despite the importance of relationships and belonging as a corollary to academic achievement, they often don't experience this. Three-quarters of students who are surveyed reported feeling stressed, tired, or bored in school. This is particularly true in secondary learners because often course taking becomes even more rigid. Course content seems to have less relevance to their daily lives. And many students feel like their voice and what they want to study during their high school years and beyond, that they don't have a lot of say in terms of what they want to engage. So redesigning high schools means creating structures, instructional practices, and policies that align with the science of learning and development. Last March, our colleagues Linda Darling-Hammond, Matt Alexander, and Laura Hernandez authored a report entitled Redesigning High Schools: 10 Features for Success, which was mentioned earlier. This study outlines 10 features that are critical in designing schools. The authors provide examples from schools across the country, reminding us of a few things. One, that there's pockets of extraordinary work across the country. And two, that we have the evidence base of what it takes to transform the student experiences. The features that are named, we could bucket into kind of three key areas of work. We need to provide challenging and engaging instructional design. We need to create relationship-centered learning environments, and we need to build professional capacity, both for our teachers and our leaders, in order to engage students in schools. We know that transforming existing schools is hard work. It's much different than starting from scratch with a group of teachers or families or students who understand the values and the instructional models, but it can happen. And the Center for School and System Redesign was launched in an effort to support schools, district, and leaders who are engaged in redesigning in this way. Our center is building a repository of resources, a hub of innovation, if you will, in order to support educational leaders and community organizers, as well as policymakers who are committed to changing the current model of schooling. In addition to sharing the proof points, just as Paul had mentioned, we are interested in synthesizing the research, conducting original studies, publishing articles, policy briefs, and blogs so that people understand the strong proof points that exist and what enabling conditions need to be put in place to change the current system. We will convene policymakers and practice-based organizations to learn from one another and to collectively sharpen our policy strategies. And finally, we'll document our district redesign processes and new assessment systems. We were really privileged to be invited into the space with Anaheim Union High School District to observe their planning process of the Orange View and Western redesign. They just opened their doors less than a week ago to their 712 campus, and people are excited to bear witness to what has been created. So today, we'll hear about how Anaheim pivoted from a contentious discussion about school consolidation to an opportunity for redesigning a 712 school. The goal here is not to paint a rosy picture or suggest a seamless transition because they've done yo person's work, but the real proof is in the days, weeks, months to come. But we've invited a panel that includes the key stakeholders at the district level who will share how they and their team approached the redesign, how they needed to shift mindsets or mindsets of their colleagues and families, naming the challenges that come in the implementation of the plan, because even when there's a clear vision and a clear goals, there are still trade-offs that need to be made, and people's sense of self also needs to be considered in this work. For example, when you tell a veteran teacher who's been teaching English for 35 years that they're now going to teach humanities in a 90-minute block, this is something that needs to be approached with great care. For a few years, there had been a discussion in Anaheim, and then last May, leaders began to frame the merger of the schools as an opportunity for redesign. I believe it was June 2024, the design team hosted a retreat, and they dug into the 10 features as a framework for their work. In September, they traveled to Hillsdale High School in San Mateo to observe how they had restructured their high school and what this looked like and felt like in practice. After their visit, the team identified promising practices that included block scheduling, collaborative planning, and that integrated kid talk, strengthening their advisory program. And there were a lot of discussions about what needed to give and how they were going to arrive at the goals they had for their students. That included numerous spell schedules. But our goal today is to give context of what needed to be negotiated and how they stayed focused on their larger goal of changing students' experiences. You'll see the parallel between what the redesign team was up to and what the system leaders were up to, and how they needed to approach the process kind of in tandem. Um, I'm excited to turn to this team. They're really the experts in this work. And I will begin by inviting Jessica Guerrero to the screen. I'm not going to give a long bio. They're very accomplished individuals, and we're really grateful to have them here to talk with us today. But Jessica was elected to the Anaheim Union High School District Board of Trustees in 2022, making history as the youngest Latina to serve on the board. She's a lifetime resident of Anaheim and a proud graduate of their public schools. Mara Harvey has been an educator for 20 years. She's a board member of the California Teachers Association. She taught English and Social Studies in Sacramento. And Mara currently serves on the CTA Associate Board of Directors. Superintendent Mike Matsuda at Anaheim Union High School District. Under his leadership, the Anaheim Union High School District has built a new educational model called the Career Preparedness Systems Framework. He has been voted the Administrator of the Year, promoting democracy in public schools, and AUHSD leads the state with 17 California democracy schools. And finally, we invite Jeff Morgenstein, President of the Anaheim Secondary Teachers Association. He's been a high school teacher, history teacher, in a UHSD for 27 years. Welcome all. We're excited to get going in our conversation. Welcome. I'm going to throw out a few questions to all of you, and then I'll kind of move to more specific questions based on your roles. But one of the things we want to think about together is, how do you see the opportunity to redesign school as a better way to navigate declining enrollment? So do you, or how do you see the opportunity to redesign school as a better way to navigate declining enrollment? Who wants to jump in first?
I will. This is Mike Matsuda. First of all, thank you for hosting this opportunity to share what's happening on the ground. This is very difficult and challenging work, but it is an opportunity to redefine public schools as a public good. You, Cheryl, outlined some of the reasons why students are disengaged. They're 70% are bored and they feel school is not connected to their lives. So I really believe that we have a huge opportunity, and we've got to put the teachers out in front of what redesign really means. So I know there's a lot to be said, but I'm going to shift it to my colleagues.
I appreciate it. Anyone want to take up that question in terms of how does this frame address declining enrollment in a way that might be more effective, or do you see that as a benefit for the conversation?
Hi, this is Jeff Morgenstern here. I think when you talk about consolidation, it's almost like this is happening to us. You know, we're having to make it work. But when you talk about redesign, we're being proactive. We're figuring out what's right for us and our community in order to kind of hopefully stem the tide of declining enrollment and making our schools what they need to be to reverse that trend. There's some things we can control, there's some things that we can't, but there's a lot within our power to control, and working together in that collaborative effort for all education partners is going to give us that best opportunity to succeed.
Thanks so much, Jeff. I'm also curious to know, what do you, as leaders in the district, hope to see in the newly redesigned schools? What do you hope to see? What might be different?
I could jump in here. First of all, thank you for the invitation to join today. For me personally, as a school board member, also as a graduate of the district, stakeholder, definitely see increased academic outcomes by being purposeful in how we are redesigning the schools that we're currently in the process of redesigning that includes, I know some of the conversations in our current redesign for Orangeview and Western has been like looping, kid talk. So being more engaged and intentional in how we're teaching, which would also re-engage our students, but also uh, address declining enrollment by re-engaging our students and also increasing academic outcomes in throughout that whole process.
Thanks so much, Jessica. Mara, do you want to speak to either of those questions? What do you hope to see in the newly redesigned schools?
Yeah, absolutely. I'm really excited to be here today and talk about the role that California can play in this and what the students in California deserve. I think that when we look at this, the other opportunity that we have in this space is to actually address the ratios that we have on our campuses. And, you know, as a 20-year teacher and as a parent of students and being in this position of being of union leadership, I hear from people all of the time that talk about, you know, how important it is for us to have the class size and ratios that we can actually afford in this state. And so I think that we look at this really critical moment and what we can do next, which truly matters for the future of public education and the future of our democracy, is to build these schools in a way where students are able to actually access their teachers because their class sizes are appropriate, that they're able to access their counselors, their librarians, school psychologists, and all of these people that need to be on campuses to support them.
Thank you. I'm going to shift a little bit, and this question really can be for any one of you on the panel again. Thinking a little bit about system leadership and decision making and how that needs to change in order to best support the redesign efforts.
Well, we're talking about changing people's mental models of schools. And again, LPI in your introduction talks about the factory model of schools. And I think all stakeholders have been yoked to the old system of schools and test scores and sorting kids out and creating systems around that. So we have got to change the way we look at schools and focus more on developing authentic student voice by allowing students to solve street data problems that are just overwhelming for this generation. And so I think there's a huge disconnect in terms of the North Star. We have got to have, California should have a North Star that supports all students in terms of their voice and agency and whole child.
Wonderful. So also wanting to think a little bit about where has there been enthusiasm in this redesign process and what have been some of the points of tension? And feel free to really name specific areas of trade-off or discussions or conversations that you had to engage in order to move this project forward.
Yeah, I think we have to recognize that this was a process that took a long time, that this didn't happen over a weekend or one visit to another school or a couple 2-hour meetings. And I think what's essential when you ask the question about the systems and the leadership is understanding, well, who needs to be involved in making those decisions? Who needs to be involved in figuring it out? Because we're coming up with something that's new, where we're implementing it at the school for the first time in our district. And I think from our perspective as educators is the teachers who are in the classroom, like the superintendent had said, are there at the table, and from the very beginning, from day one, is making sure that the point of contact with the students day in and day out are in those conversations about what do we want our school to look like, what do we want our classrooms to look like, what are the resources now are at our disposal with this opportunity, and really just seizing that. Now, this conversation lasted for a long time. That's kind of 2 steps forward, 1 step back. We had to fine tune, we had to pivot. This is a very complex, a lot of moving parts to it. But I think essentially the credit given to the leadership all around is that everybody was welcomed at the table and that our teachers were welcomed at the table and participating in that redesign and making sure that their perspective, their classroom expertise, their feedback is always there and available for things to be fine-tuned. You know, as you mentioned earlier, we just started school last week, and now kind of the proof is going to be before us over the next, several weeks and months, and we're going to have to probably adjust and make changes and see what needs to be done at the site. But just making sure that those lines of communication are always open and that the educator voice from teachers to SLPs to nurses to psychologists to everybody who's there to support the education at that school is part of that conversation, along with, of course, and most importantly, our students and our families as well, so that their concerns and their participation, the assets they bring to the conversation, are well represented in the decision making.
Great. Thank you. I think I'm going to direct this question to Jessica. How would you talk about the board role in creating space for school redesign through a range of processes, including the budget process and governance processes? What is the
Yes,
role?
thank you for the question. Yeah, so a little backstory on how we got to our decision. So we were facing a decline in student enrollment like many of our school districts across California. So the decision to consolidate junior high into a high school came with a lot of questions, similar to the question that was just asked before, some of the challenges, right? One of the biggest challenges was change. Um, um, I think, even as a school, open a 7 through 12 school, how does that really look like? But
Jessica,
the
Jessica, we're
is
losing
looking
you a
at the
little
budget.
bit.
Yeah.
We're losing you a little bit. I don't know
Oh,
if you can
can you hear me?
adjust. Yeah,
Can you hear me now?
I can. It's better.
Okay. Okay. Um, yes, so as a school board, we made the decision to consolidate a school, and then from there, it was being intentional in that work. We weren't just gonna put 7th and 8th graders onto high school campus, and then that'll be the end of it. Similar to what Jeff said, it's a multi-year project, being purposeful and looking at the budget throughout that multiple years and how we can make sure that we're prepared when the schools open. A lot of work went onto the school site as well to differentiate 7th through 8th sites. There was a lot of conversation about how teacher collaboration was going to look, making sure we had the capacity, both in our budget and our district policies, to support teacher collaboration. And there was also purposeful work in ensuring that our family and communities were part of the process, right? Making sure that they have the capacity to share their voice. At the end of the day, right? It's our student schools, it's our family schools. So making sure that they're part of the process and that the budget and our district policies reflected what we wanted the redesign to look like.
Thank you so much. And I'm going to turn back to you, Superintendent Matsuda, about what you learn in the process, particularly as it relates to communicating to the different shareholders and having their interests and voices represented.
Well, I think having a history of work with community schools and familiarity with what that means about creating trust in the community and with our internal stakeholders, as Jeff Morgenstern mentioned. I mean, this is not easy work when you're talking about changing everybody's approach to what school is and what it can be. I think that the big mistake that districts often make are top-down decisions, not including the voices of people most affected, students, teachers, and parents. And that would be a big mistake. I think schools are scrambling because, yes, there is a crisis with not just declining enrollment, but also attendance, chronic absenteeism. And this goes to why we have unyoked test scores from teachers. We allow them to work together to build strategies, beginning with the needs and assets of the community, the street data, and then creating solutions through what we call performance task assessments, giving students opportunities to solve these problems, and then to create their authentic voice around whatever that is, and finding their passion. And this is why we lead in democracy school in civic engagement, because they want to do something about that. They start to learn to connect the dots and solve problems and become entrepreneurs. And this is why we can pass bonds with almost 70% of the vote over the years. You know, that we have created Anaheim Union, a brand that the public, no matter what party or the business community and churches, they believe in this brand. And that is teacher-led, that brand.
That's exciting, and really thinking about different teaching and learning frames in the schools that you just described. I'm going to turn to you, Mara, in terms of the ways in which teachers need to be supported. And if the teaching role shifts, what are the kinds of supports, resources, learning opportunities that facilitate this work?
Well, I want to go back a little bit to what was just said, which is that something our union has strongly advocated for is community schools and that shared decision making, because really in that space where teachers have voice in what it is that is happening on their campuses, that in itself provides the support, right? We're getting rid of those top-down decisions and putting in the hands of the teachers the ability to help create the learning environment, bringing that with, bringing the students in that space as well. And I've had that experience, before too, in our local district of bringing community schools and the community schools model to here. And having sitting in spaces with administrators who say, oh, this means that we should just have a garden on our campus, and having to go through that process of getting the administrator to listen to what it is that the community actually needs at their site is incredibly important. So I think in one space, we're talking about that as just a form of support. Being able to have your voice in the space of being an educator is incredibly supportive. But along with that, kind of going back to what I was talking about before, austerity has never served students. So we have to still also be willing to invest in public education. And like I said, if we're looking at class size and we're looking at those connections that students have to campus, they have to be able to feel that that campus provides for them an actual connection to a human, to an adult in some way. And as a classroom teacher, I taught upwards of 42, 46 students in a classroom. And I knew in those spaces, I was not able to connect with every single one of those kids, that I was not serving the purpose that I was in there for. So I think that, we look at where we are in California, we rank in the bottom of the states for the ratios of students to teachers. And so when we look at what declining enrollment actually means for us, we do have that space where we can say, like, being in a classroom with a manageable amount of students of a high school class with 28 versus 40 is a huge amount of support. And so I think when people ask that question of educators, what can we do to support you? Some of it is just create an environment where a teacher can feel successful, where a teacher can be successful, where we know that our efficacy is real.
Yeah,
And I think there is important.
No, I appreciate that. And I'm going to shift a little bit. And I think that we've kind of named at the top of this discussion, like, think the enrollment declines are going to affect budget numbers, and that is the environment we're in, and how do we do more with less? And I think it is a complicated ask, right, of teachers, of community members, of leaders. I'm going to turn to Jeff, though, to ask kind of what are the ways in which we get to creative solutions in this environment, and what is the role of the teacher union in that work?
Yeah, I think
Easy one, Jeff, real easy. I just thought I'd send you a
easy
softball.
questions, easy questions. I think just kind of picking back a little bit on what Mara and Superintendent Matsuda said is that our beginning of transformation process with community schools kind of created that fertile ground for us to be successful in redesign, and also for us to be flexible and meet the challenges that are rising in our community right now, like around immigration and deportation, and really bringing in all of those voices together. So that is, I think, a critical plank of how we've been successful as a district in collaboration as a union with the district as well. Kind of on the union side of things is, knowing that we've never consolidated schools before, knowing that we're going through this redesign process, early on, we knew that we had to be proactive in making sure that we bargain an MOU around these changes. So it just saves us so much time and so much grief in having to go back afterward and try to kind of unwind things. And so a lot of credit to everybody around, and a lot of hard work by a lot of people, both on the district side and on the teacher union side, about really getting in and bargaining. And again, it took like about 6 or 7 meetings to do this and really kind of get at what can we do to set the conditions so that everybody at the consolidated site, the redesign site, has the best chance for success. But I think too, we also have to realize, as educational partners from around the state, right? You have students and parents and community members and teachers, other employee educator unions and district officials. We're not, and I like to use this analogy, a surfer riding a wave that we have no control over, right? We are the wave machine. And so while, yes, we're going to have to adapt to the circumstances that we find ourselves in and be, like you said, creative and find new opportunities through redesign. But we also have a huge role to play in changing the circumstances around our state and changing the conversation around public education and what we can all do together so that it lessens that need to feel like we need to retreat and always go to the topic of austerity. And so I think I would encourage all of us to go down that lane and unlock the power that we have together collectively to really change those conditions. And for me, one thing, I have almost 1,150 members in our union, and I did junior high history for 26 years. So I kind of only know a small sliver of what's out there in terms of education from a personal experience. So for me, in talking about being creative and really creating those conditions for redesign and what that redesign looks like, for me, from the union perspective, is just unleashing our teacher creativity, their perspectives, their daily experiences in the classroom, the work that they've done, tens of thousands of hours of education that we bring to the table, and being able to kind of make these creative choices and make these plans together. So having that teacher experience and that expertise be a part of that redesign from the very beginning and all the way through is, for me, what I need to do to try to secure, make sure that I use my advocacy so that their voices are heard and also listened to.
I'd like to add to that a little bit, Jeff, because I'd like to give you credit too for having a stance of inquiry. To have the union president right there alongside the teachers going up to Hillsdale with some of our board members too. I think that was really, really important. Our assistant superintendent was also there. So, it's not easy to build trust in these times, but I think also too that as Jeff pointed out, these are really complex decisions that affect the bargaining and everything. We're moving forward. The other thing that this has done is created a culture of redesign across the district. We're not waiting for schools to consolidate. There are teachers now that are excited about these opportunities, and especially in the age of AI, in terms of what that means. I also think too, Paul earlier in the Bellwether report talked about the importance of bringing in partners like community college for dual enrollment and others, certificate type of things that are being offered. So all of this stuff is on the table, in creating these smaller, they call them the learning groups, where teachers share the same students. It's not small in terms of class size, but it's a kind of a school within a school. And then having AI support for both the teachers and students to really uplift the human relational capital that's so needed, so we can move away from the boredom that's going on in the schools, and have better teacher engagement, as well as students coming out with more applied opportunities to solve problems.
Thanks so much. I think I'm going to pivot and turn to some of our audience or panel questions for the panel from our audience members. But if there are things that we want to return back to for conversation, we'll make some space for that. Jessica, I think, spoke to this question a little bit, but what is the role of students in this process, and how have staff at Orangeview and Western engaged not only students in traditional leadership roles, but all students? So not just our student leaders, but all students in the redesign process. Anyone want to take that?
I can start off a little bit sharing. So our students were part of the committee to assist us in the redesign process. That was very important. I know it's been mentioned multiple times, but it was definitely they're the biggest stakeholder, right? It's their school. And it was incredible because some of the alumni there from Western High School had younger siblings, right, that were going to start in Orangeview Junior High School. So there was definitely areas of collaboration and getting to hear. They also got to share some of their favorite parts in school, right? And how can we make the experience better for when 7th through 8th grade students join the campus as well. The students were also part of our town halls. We had several town halls where the community came to share some of their concerns. Our students were part of that as well. They were there to share concerns as well. So they were definitely a co-designer throughout this process.
Wonderful. Anyone want to add there in terms of student process?
Yeah, I just want to speak to that a little bit, just because in the transition, I think it is really important to recognize, when we do our needs and assets assessments at our community schools and we're reaching out to the community, that we have a threshold that we are required to meet in order for us to move forward, right? So we're 75–80% of the community members need to respond. And that's in our local where I am now. But I think what's really interesting about that is that our districts oftentimes make decisions. And when we look at their LCAP response rates, it's about 5% of the parents responding. And in our community schools, and this is why those models are so important, we don't move forward until we have the voice of the students and of their community. I think somebody asked very quickly, saw somebody ask about community and caregivers. And that's been a process of coming out and trying to figure out how do you make those connections and trying multiple different ways of engagement until you're able to get the engagement that you need. So there's a time commitment in that. But it is really very important in looking at our school sites to make sure that, you're setting a baseline or a goal so that, you're meeting that engagement level before you move forward with a change or something on your campus.
Thanks so much, Mara. So one of the other questions that has come in is that there are persistent enrollment declines as well as chronic absenteeism. The person is curious about what strategies specifically have been the most impactful in terms of re-engaging families and students in your district. So given the decline in absenteeism, what are the kinds of strategies that are bringing students back into the fold?
Well, we just started school last week, so we'll see. But I do, one of the panelists mentioned this concept of kid talk, which we learned from Hillsdale, where these teachers of 5 to 7 who are sharing the same students every other week spend an hour really focusing and sharing about the kids. It's kind of a pre-EMT. It involves the counselors, social workers, community school people, as well as all the teachers talking about their kids, their shared group of kids. And Orangeview Western, I think, have about 12 of those. Every teacher is involved in that kid talk, and there's 12 groups of maybe 5 to 7 teachers. So we have high hopes with this concept of kid talk, as well as the initial looping that's starting with grades 7 through 9. So I think we're on our way because the energy there is really, really positive.
Wonderful. Do you want to add to that, Jeff?
I think it just kind of comes down to the building of those relationships. How can we set the conditions within redesign, like Superintendent Matsuda had said, like Kid Talk, for example, where those relationships between teachers and their students, and all adults on campus and their students, and relationships between the school and the families grow, are given the opportunity to grow. And it really starts with just listening and inviting in the community and to listen, to be a part of that decision-making process. Like one of the things I learned early on in community schools was, sure, we have a kind of a path forward that's been sort of, suggested to us, and it's been very effective. But sometimes we forget to ask our community members, what is the vision for your child? What does success look like for your child and your family? And incorporating all of the assets of the community. And that the better we can build those relationships and create the conditions to build those relationships, I think that's going to give us the best opportunity to stem that tide of not only declining enrollment, but actually absenteeism. Mm-hmm. And I don't have the numbers off the top of my head, but as a district, we fare pretty well when it comes to absenteeism compared to others within Orange County and around the state because of that community schools approach and just the center of having those folks build relationships with their community, with the parents and with the students, and always being ready to listen.
Yeah, you pointed to, I believe, someone pointed earlier, just the fertile ground that had been set as the district moved towards redesign because of community schools and other practices that were already in place at the district. There is another question about just a very specific example from the Western Orangeview redesign that shows something that was co-created in terms of a shared governance process. So thinking about the preparation last year and something you're implemented in the new 712 school that can walk us through this process of co-creation.
I think one quick example is that the teachers coming together and informing the district what type of professional learning support is needed, especially for this concept of kid talk. the looping and the longer the block scheduling. I think the teachers are really, this is where it matters a lot, because if the district does not listen and support the teachers, why are we doing all this stuff? So they have the freedom to ask the questions, to develop their own committees on this, and we have a structure of informing the district and prioritizing resources for that.
Wonderful. Another question is about alternative high schools in the district. Are they part of a redesign process, and how, if they aren't, would you seek including them in the future?
I think there are huge opportunities. Like I said, we have the culture of innovation throughout the district. We're not a district tethered to test scores. So it's in alternative ed, we have amazing teachers that are focused on engagement, problem solving. We also have Cambridge Virtual Academy. So what we're doing with this virtual, we have some amazing teachers there. We are building concurrent enrollment opportunities where students could be at their home school and also enroll in a virtual academy at the same time, completing a internship certificate for a nursing assistant or dental assistant. But I think alternative ed is ripe for innovation.
Wonderful. I think this question might be for Mara or Jeff.
And add some, sorry.
Oh, sorry. Did someone want to jump in there, Jessica?
Oh, sorry. Yes, I was gonna chime in on the alternate education. I would definitely agree, right? We're in the process, day maybe 6 of opening Orange View Junior High School, 7 to 12 school. So it's definitely lots to learn, but definitely taking that as example as we continue our redesign process into our other sites. I know community schools was mentioned a lot, and this work could not have been possible without the foundation that the community schools built, especially with the support of our ASTA and our teachers union, ASTA, our teachers union. So definitely looking at the lens of community schools, right? Not every community school is the same, just as like every school that we redesign is going to be different as well. It's going to depend on the stakeholders, the students, the parents and family, and what the whole child approach looks like for that site. So definitely a possibility for Alta in the future.
Thank you so much. And this question, I believe Mara or Jeff might take. Someone was wondering about engaging members of the community. What does it look like to communicate with families, community organizations, and students about the redesign process, particularly because there's always a lot of unknowns and uncertainties? How do you get them on board, and what have been some of the opportunities or challenges?
That's a really good question. So I appreciate that question. Getting people on board was, initially it was a challenge, right? It's asking people who have been, I think for a lot of our members of our community, they've been shut out of education for a very long time. They don't feel like they had a voice. And so to approach them and then say, we would like you to come in and be part of this leadership committee, be part of this team. We definitely face challenges there. I think in our district, we're in our 3rd year and it's building trust. It's really reaching out, and it's going to places where maybe not people didn't necessarily think that they were going to run into their educators, in community events and places like that.
Mm-hmm.
So that was one of the things that is a challenge for us. But when people start to see that they have a voice in something, then we started to see that pick up and people starting to show up at more events.
Thanks so much. And Jeff, did you want to add on there?
Yeah, I would just add to what Mara had said. Our community, and it takes time to build that trust, but they had to begin to understand that it's not just checking a box. That, hey, we had a parent representative at a meeting, check that box, right? Is that we actually build that conversation and build those relationships. And I think it's important for folks to understand that when you engage with the community to get the community a part of redesign or any decision making that needs to take place within district, it's always the beginning of a conversation, and that conversation never ends. It's always ongoing, right? So sometimes you're not going to get everywhere you want to go on the first day or in the first month or even in the first year, but you continue to lean into those relationships and those conversations so that the community slowly, gradually, right, as that trust is built, becomes part of that decision-making process, and that they feel welcomed and empowered to be part of that decision-making process. And that's just kind of an ongoing a way of doing things that we've adopted. And, I think back and over the 4 years that we've on our steering committee for community schools, and I reflect about my attitude as a classroom teacher or even as a union leader compared to now, I've seen tremendous growth. But that's because we were dedicated. We all decided to make sure that we leaned into this and kind of figured it out step at a time. But knowing that this conversation, it doesn't end. It's ongoing in the way we do things.
But ultimately, I think we're realizing too that we no longer have a monopoly on our kids. It was earlier mentioned by Paul that yes, there's demography and everything and birth rates, but parents and students are opting out of public schools. And as we all know, there's other monetized constructs out there that are very highly into marketing and taking our kids, right? We have got to be aggressive about the product of public education. And that's why I'm so proud of our teachers rolling up their sleeves and really focus on these authentic opportunities to engage kids through instruction.
Yeah, it's really exciting and it's really admirable. I think this is the question. We know it, we have to really reconstruct the system, figure out engagement, make sure it's authentic and meaningful. And, as we prepare our young people for the future, and it's hard work. It was named many times. It takes time to prepare, plan, implement, but it also takes time in terms of refinement and asking the questions in an ongoing way. It's not necessarily finished work. And so I really appreciate all of you letting us in on your journey about redesign. I'm seeing Mara maybe wanting to share a quick thought before we move.
I do want to share one thing because it just based on what was just said too about other people in this space who are, using their, capitalism or whatever to address taking our students, that I want us to really kind of push back on that idea that we need to do more with less. We don't need to do more with less. We also need to organize together to demand more, because we live in a country where 4 hedge fund managers make more than every single kindergarten teacher all put together. And, so I think there is a space here where we really have to think about our union is organizing to demand more, and we really want to partner with our administrators. We want to partner with our communities, because at no point in time, as a teacher, did anybody ever say to me, I'm going to give you more to do more? I've been told for 23 years in the classroom, we're going to give you less, but we expect you to do more. And I want us to push back on that message, that, we need to do more with less. We need to do more. And I don't disagree with that, but I think that there's opportunities for us to get more as well.
Thanks. And it really is about the collaboration and really reminding people about the importance of public education. There's so much at stake for our young people and communities, as we know, particularly in this moment. So really appreciate it. One of the things we know as we engage in redesign, it's often that we see a shiny finished product and we know it's taken 10, 20, 15 years to get there. And so you guys are letting us in on the ground floor. And I think that reading about understanding this process is going to really help other schools jump in and get engaged as well in their particular communities. So thank you so much. I'm going to shift gears and introduce folks to or encourage you first to just continue to be engaged with the center. I shared some of the activities that we are up to. You can scan a QR in order to get our newsletter or blogs. We've just launched a Redesign Dispatch newsletter that will share resources, new research reports, and other professional learning opportunities. But now I have the distinct pleasure of introducing our new president and CEO of Learning Policy Institute, Elena Silva. Elena is going to just give us some closing remarks as we think about the future of our work. Elena comes to LPI from New America, where she led efforts to improve public education nationwide. Under her leadership, New America birth through 12th grade education program grew into a nationally recognized hub for research and policy innovation, driving systemic change in areas such as teacher preparation, school finance and equity, and support for English learners and students with disabilities. She brings decades of experience working across sectors, including philanthropy, government, and nonprofit organizations in order to improve education for young people. Elena, I'll turn it over to you for a close. Thanks for joining.
Thank you, Cheryl. Appreciate it. And on behalf of LPI, I want to thank everyone here for joining us today. There's clearly incredible work happening and tremendous shared commitment to making this change happen. So I also want to thank just directly the panelists that are here and others who are leading this work in districts and in schools and communities across the country. As we heard today, there's a few things I want to lift up. Declining enrollment is a very real challenge, a challenge among many. It's also a clear reminder that we can be and must be intentional about designing schools that are really preparing young people for their lives. And as Superintendent Matsuda said just now, or a few minutes back, developing a new mental model of how schools can and should work for our children and our families and our communities. A few other points just to elevate. First, that successful redesign requires real collaboration. If we want lasting change, we need a vision that's shared across teachers and administrators, across districts and unions, schools and families, and we need collective ownership of this change and what it means for everyone involved. And related, we need to stay grounded in who most importantly should sit at the center of this. So students and educators, we've seen reforms come and go again and again, and any redesign effort that doesn't prioritize the learning experience and working conditions it will ultimately fail. We have to create environments where teachers can innovate and thrive, where students are active participants in shaping their education. The districts and the leaders and folks from today and elsewhere are showing us that this work is possible. So that's really inspiring to me. I hope it's inspiring to everyone here. From California's approaches to the collaborative models we're seeing emerging across the country, we have evidence and an increasing amount of evidence that transformation can happen. I don't need to tell you all that this is not easy work and these are not easy times. At LPI, this is deeply important to us. We are committed to generating and sharing evidence-based approaches to supporting this vision of redesign, and we are not going to move from that. It is absolutely our commitment now and moving forward. The real work, of course, is happening in the districts, in the schools, the classrooms, those of you that have already opened up your doors, and others who will soon open their doors for the next school year or for this school year. It's going to take a lot of courage, a lot of collaboration, hard work, a really strong dose of creativity to move this forward. And this means both structural and cultural change. This is another thing that came through in this panelists. It's both, and that is really strong work that requires like integration and shared commitment by all. I want to thank you all for your partnership in this work. That is my most important message to you, is thank you for being here. Thank you for doing this work wherever you are. Please stay connected to our Center on School and System Redesign and our growing research base on community schools, on whole child education, on school transformation. The Learning Policy Institute, again, we're committed to doing this work. We are really thrilled to be in partnership with all of you. And I want to thank you again for a wonderful event and learning series, and I look forward to staying connected. Thank you so much.